Now, Dr. Ray Kerkhove is who you're really here to listen to and see today, and we're going to, he's going to talk about some really interesting things. Now, no, I know he's not talking about this book. He talked about this book last time he came, didn't you, Ray? Which was really interesting. But for those of you who either weren't here or didn't manage to get a copy of this publication last time, it is for sale again. So this little book, this is, as I said, not what he's talking about today, but it is related in many respects. And Ray's book is for sale at $30 at the front desk, should you wish to. All right, we've just got to get a little bit of fiddling to get it to take up the whole screen. Now, Ray, of course, is from Griffith University, and he works very closely with the Indigenous population in southeast Queensland, and is a wealth of information. And his last talk here was truly excellent. So I think we're just about there. So if we can say, please make Dr. Ray Kerkhove feel welcome. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, if I just step up, you'll know soon enough. Hello, everybody. The theme this day, Liz asked me to do another talk, so I'm back. But I thought instead to concentrate a bit on, I've been involved over several years with a lot of the, what we call it, revitalisation of local crafts and that sort of thing. So I thought it's a bit interesting, particularly because of your interest in the environment, to look at what did Aboriginal society, what did it actually look like? You know, what did the culture look like? There's a lot of myths about, you know, how it is, and you often see presentations which seem to be of Central Australian people and this sort of thing. That wasn't the culture here. Some years ago, I was involved with David Horton, who you might know, this massive thing. If you know the big colourful map of Australia, of showing all the tribes, yeah, that's him. And we had an idea to do. He's a guy who knows a lot about the regions of Australia, you know, the different cultural regions. He put a lot of work into that. So we were trying to do something at the National Museum in Canberra, looking at the differences between the different areas to highlight the fact that no, it wasn't the same all over Australia. Well, that didn't go too far, although maybe they'll do it eventually. But this was some sort of preliminary stuff I did, and I don't know how well you can see that from the back, but just to sort of show that you had not only different environments in different parts of Australia, but you had entirely different cultures in those parts. Like, for those of you who know the Kimberleys, a lot of it's about these massive gorges and the flooding and the Wandjina figures. If you go to Cape York, there's a lot of the paintings that are very large. They do a lot of sculpture. Murray-Darling's a lot of very intricate sort of work. They had fur cloaks and things. Tassie had very much their own style of things with a lot more geometric stuff, and so on. This doesn't show it terribly well, but that's what I'm going to be showing you. I'm just going to be doing a whole pictorial journey through what the culture was like around this part of Australia. And it's based on a lot of archival photos that I've had to source over ages, and you know, including a lot of sketches and so on. So firstly I'll look at environment, then at dress and ornament, then at implements and crafts, then at types of sites, and then also the changes that have happened over time. Because people assume that, oh, it just sort of went from traditional to now, but there were phases in between. Okay, the environment here. Well, you live here, you know what it's like. That actually shapes culture in a lot of different ways. What we call southeast Queensland is unusual in the sense you've got this massive lot of sand regions, great sandy region, which have got jungles and things growing on. That's very odd in world terms. You've got a lot of volcanic plugs. You've got these strange forests of pines growing in a subtropic area. Very odd. Areas of rainforest, lots of lakes and rivers, swamps, all sorts of stuff. And that, of course, shapes the local dreaming. The biggest story here is about the Maroochy River, and all the mountains nearby are involved in a battle. And that includes even Mount Ewa. There's stories of that, and Mooloola and so on. And you have a similar sort of story about the volcanic plugs of Glasshouse Mountains. The other big numbers here are the Bunya, and there's a whole other story about the coloured sands, and that relates to Catharabra in this area, about the rainbow serpent to do with Noosa. So you can see how the environment gets involved in the culture, and that's expressed. This is a work by Brent Miller and Lyndon Davis. A lot of their artwork gets inspired by that. I'm going to do this quickly to show you the environment. You've probably seen some of these photos, but they're really old, and it's interesting to see the change. This is the back of Maroochydore, and from what we can work out, that seems to be a whole lot of dead pandanus. So you see the dunes. This is where Maroochy Head was. See, this is Pincushion Island, which is still there. It doesn't have the trees anymore. That's the view looking down towards Port Cartwright. That's Port Cartwright. You can see it was kind of wooded once. That's Noosa. Look, it hasn't changed much. Brisbane. This is getting towards Udlow. This is the Maroochy River. You can see some things haven't changed, thank God. Now we're getting to the Blackall Ranges. Very dense forests there. This was in Baroon, now gone under the dam. And I love these photos because this shows the extent of the forest that used to be around Blackall Ranges. You can see how thick it was. This one I love particularly. You can see how there's hoop and some bunya there, but there's a horse and carriage. But you can see how thick it was, and they said you had to basically crawl through to get to where the bunya lands were, where Aboriginal people would have their gatherings. That's it's all being clear, but it was actually sort of open woodland here in Baroon. And the accounts that I've read were fascinating. They said there were hundreds of thousands of possums and koalas. They talk about flock pigeons and all sorts of rainforest animals, catbirds, I've got a list there. But a lot of very dense environment and huge quantities of animals. I put this up because basically every environment's got some key resources, and they're part of the environment. And I guess you all know what these are, but I'll just... What's this guy? There you go. And that? What? Basket fern? Yay! Okay, what's this thing? Fish. A fish, yeah, wow. Okay, cool. A bit more specific? Mullet, there you go. What's these?
Yummy fish.
Black bean.
Yeah, okay.
Onions.
And
Oysters.
now, I put all these food groups because these were the mentioned again and again as the main foods of this area. And I mean, these can grow very big, and they're very starchy, and it needs a lot of work to get them non-toxic, the same as these. So there was a lot of work done on that. But they made a lot of their so-called bread or damper out of this. Mullet rum, was enormous. They used to say the main food was sort of like bread and fish, but not our bread, but this sort of bread. And of course, the same with the bungwall fern. That actually grew in like whole swamps that were actually kept fired on the outside, so they were maintained a bit like crops. And that had a lot to do with the movement of people too. There were big gatherings to fish the mullet, and that would involve all groups from a whole lot of different areas. I've used this map. This is from William Mackenzie. He was a Kilcoy elder, and I love this because he actually shows these dotted little areas. He says they were neutral areas, and you see they run along the river valleys and along the ranges. And he said that's where the people used to move. I mean, that doesn't mean that nobody owned that area, but it was just the accepted path that you went along when you travelled. And you can see how that relates to where the Bunya festival is held on the coast and inland. You can see how that sort of draws people, and the same with the mullet run. some of these, you know, it's interesting, like there were oyster gatherings. I've only just been reading about this, up at, where we are. Yeah, that's right, it's here. I forgot. and the people came from, I'm in Brisbane, you know, so it's, and the people came from sort of, Bridie and Caloundra and all the way from Narrabah to here to have oyster, you know, feasts and groggeries, you know. Well, they're still having them. You are. What? Someone's having an oyster gathering, right? But the point I wanted to make with this is that there was people often think, oh, the groups are just all little separate things, but in fact there was a lot of movement of people towards large-scale gatherings for ceremony, for feasts, for social occasions, and so on. And I love using this map again based on William Mackenzie because it talks about the tribal alliances. So like there might be 5, 6 different groups that are forming an alliance and they do their tournaments together on that basis. And all these groups here would then go to the Bunya gathering. So the people did know each other and they did travel around. They weren't just sort of stuck in their little area. Dress and ornament. So let's start with how we reconstruct that. I'm lucky to have some of these photos from Michael Laird, who's sort of the king of this sort of thing. He's Indigenous himself, and he's been gathering these for ages. So this is how people of this area look. See, they don't necessarily look like Central Australians, and they didn't dress like them. I've brought this up to show some of the main sort of things that were worn. Headbands are white. That's not because it's cloth. If you actually see the photos closer up, they were done with fibre, but they were put in pipe clay. They loved wearing these bright white headbands. Women often had feathers and see this, often down or flowers. They'd stick in their hair with beeswax. It was very common to have these, see this sort of like cross, you'll see it in some of the others, they have these things made out of reeds. Fur cloaks, they were used, but we have very few images of them. You see this guy, he's got the same sort of thing as what she's got. But it sort of goes under the chest like that. The men often had top knots like this. This is an early photo I just got from Rosewood, but it shows, it's very rare because it actually shows the women all in their fur cloaks. We have so few images of this. Yeah, we go. Some close-ups. The challine, or the made from what's that thing called again? The nautilus shell. That was a really important status symbol for men and women. It meant you were kind of highly initiated. You see, there's a woman got one, and that's actually side on. You're wondering, it looks like a banana, but it's actually because the shell is curved. So if it's sort of sitting the other way, it looks like that. But you can see here's one. See that? This is Fraser Island man, but I'm putting these here to show the similarity because this is Fred Embry, who was from this area, but he's got the same. They have these grass tough headdresses. There were also things that made of, I call them macrame, but they were made out of pandanus fibre, like what this lady's wearing, and that's actually a Grafton woman, but they had made the same thing, almost like a daisy chain here. These are some illustrations from Craig, who diary of a naturalist, and he describes it as sort of a fur thing that was linked over there that the women wore. And this thing, a badge for funerary practices. So there was quite a variety of ornament. Gone too quick. You can see here again what I mean about the women having a lot of stuff in their hair like that. See, she's wearing again a pendant. You can see the variety of necklaces. See again this crossband thing. This picture of of a lady. She's got a little pubic tassel, so they wear something like a little skirt, you know. I love these young men and young women here. I think it's very kind of intimate and lovely, but see they're all wearing these little necklaces again, and he's got a pure white headband on again. But it's a very kind of, nice scene. Paint up around here. Now the style of art it was different from other parts of Australia. It was bold geometric design. You can see it like this is a man in Devianbury. He's painted himself half white and half black. This is out near Ipswich. You see they've got these chunks of paint like done here. This is actually in exhibition grounds. But here you can see it would be like a sock almost, and up to here. This is in 1860s in Brisbane. And this is interesting because the men too would actually ornament their hair with down and feathers. You can basically see there, you can't see the colour. The paint-ups were actually quite strikingly different. They also differed according to the occasion. This is a whole series from the Anthropology Museum in Brisbane, but it's interesting that this is Willie Mackenzie sort of showcased this, and of course that's Jinnabara, so it's not necessarily the same, although he also put on the paints of other groups to show what they dressed like. But you can't read the inscriptions, so I've written them up top. But to show you that you'd actually dress differently in your paint according to the occasion. So this is actually a headman. You know, the headman would, if he's welcoming people coming in, he'd dress like that. If he was on a mission to sort of go and see a brother or something intertribal, he'd wear a lot of white so that people wouldn't spear him because they'd know he's on a peaceful mission. But if it was serious stuff, which could mean, it's not necessarily a war or anything, but if there was some serious business to be done, then they'd have to dress like this. And there was a formal dance, and there was an informal dance, and so on it went, you know? So you'd actually have different styles, so it wasn't even just one. All right, the implements and the arts. I did a lot of work on with canoe reconstruction here. That was, this is the closest we could get to sketching it, but they've been, Lyndon and all that have been, God, they've worked so hard on this, and they keep creating better and better models that have been touring Australia, actually. They were basically bark canoes, tied bark canoes made from swamp mahogany, sometimes stringy bark. I love this image because it's actually at Harvey Bay, and we think it's could be to do with the mullet run. They're with their toros, which are their fishing nets, and you can see the boats, you can see the little cross planks there. This is actually from Pettigrew, who you might know as a timber worker here, and he sketched this, and the amazing thing was this is a four-cornered raft, so it's actually flat, and this was used on the rivers, and each of these corners was tied, so it was this big flat piece, so it's quite different. Similarly, there were log rafts and things, so it wasn't just this. And some of these were really big, they were like 30, 40 feet if they were going to catch a turtle or dugong or something. They were big, massive things, and they'd have to find a big tree to do that. Nets were the other big thing, because what are people living on here? Fish. You know, that's really important. Toros is what they call these, which are these basically the hand nets. And you can see there's a bit of a sock. You see he's holding that up there. There's some still in the Queensland Museum, but there are other ones too. There were set nets like this. See, there's a set net behind here. This is in Brisbane. But these are all handheld nets. And there was spearfishing. This is reconstruction. It looks crazy, but it was work I did with Lyndon and the whole of the others, trying to work this out. They're actually really complicated. You think they're simple, but they're not. This actually closes like a mouth, and the idea is that you stand there like this, and because you're there, the fish are going to the wings, if you like. And they're funneled into here because it's got a little string across. And you snap it closed like this. This actually closes like that, like a mouth. And then you haul the damn thing, and they were very heavy, up onto the bank, and it's got a little tie at the back that you let out the fish to whoever's got to collect them. So they were ingenious, really. I love this image because although it's North New South Wales, it does actually show how it was like in this area too, subtropic, along the rivers and so on. People would be fishing, spearfishing, or from boats or nets. Nets were the main thing. There was some line fishing too. People think they didn't line fish. They actually did, but it wasn't really much of a thing. It was usually done with a little splinter of wood or bone. As this example, this is central Queensland, but I know they did it down here too. Now, the shields really show what I was telling you about, how the real blockish geometric designs that you had here. And you see he's also got a headdress on. These are all early images from between Brisbane and here. I've gone to a lot of trouble because there's a lot of sorts of shields, but these are the ones that I can identify as being really close to here. And this image is really interesting because you can see some of these same sort of shields being used. This little pattern, see where I've got the blue mark? It looks very similar to the official symbol for Noosa, and it's a particular flower. And I'm talking with Kerry Neal, his family have passed this on as a particular cubby symbol, so I know that one is, and I know that this was another symbol for this area, and that's actually a vertebrae of a mullet. The mullets are so important. So all these things actually represent something, but they're in an abstract form, and you can kind of, once you know it, and I mean if you've seen mullet vertebrae, then you kind of go, oh yeah, I can get it now, but it's subtle. The kind of clubs and boomerangs of this area were actually very distinctive. They're really, if you ever get to the museum to see them, they're odd-looking things. They had often very eccentric sort of shapes. This, I think, was made like a kangaroo head, but they were almost like animal forms, you know. But they were the same for the boomerangs. And I think it's because of the nature of the forests here that you can't sort of use a warmer so much. So they were actually using these unusual shaped boomerangs that would actually be able to manoeuvre the landscape a certain way. They often had these, what they call pineapple-headed clubs, like that. And the boomerangs were often like this with these little etchings on them. There's some more. This is a warmer, but it's down the. That one's from the Gold Coast, I think. Why wouldn't they have many warmers here? Yeah, too much trees in the way. It's an implement used out way on the way with, and even this thing isn't very big, you know. But they had these massive bowls that they make out of wood. This is a bull roarer, obviously. Message sticks. These are the kind of axes, pounders. The basketry here, there's very distinctive. Usually, is these. If you ever get to see them, they're like this big. These big rectangle ones. That's the main ones that women make. Or they make these little pots. So it seemed to be like mostly one or the other of that. This is a basket for carrying bunya nuts. But you can see there's quite a variety there, and quite ornate. Type of huts. Well, it's much more varied than people think, and it depends on what's available. What does this look like? What? Yeah, that's right. And it's actually on Stratty that I've seen similar at Sandgate and other spots where there was paper bark available. This is more streaky. You can see some of them were quite large, and the shapes differ. You know, you've got like round, you've got like teepee shape. It depended on, and this is more like for summer. You know, in the middle of summer, you don't really want to be stuck in some, so it's very open. Or if you're just passing through, at the gap, you know. Type of sites. Right. Well, everybody sort of usually likes to see, you know, ceremonial sites, and that's if you haven't visited, it's well worth seeing. Is the Johnson Road Bora Ground. Someone told me it's reconstructed. I don't know. You know, it has got a sort of small end. The typical Bora Ground is 2 rings, but it often had. Well, this is a sketch that was done. Some say it was Amity Point. Others say it was Redwood, done by Hobbles in the 1820s. And he recorded a whole lot of things like made of grass or of earth or sand, images of canoes and animals and so on. And similarly, there would be carved things. This is North New South Wales, but there'd be carved items along the way. This was in Glidelines, so we have found some. And I know, talking with Bianca Beetson, that there's actually hand stencils here and there. But this part of Australia doesn't really have the rock for doing massive engravings and paintings. It's often little occasional ones like that, and most of them are kept fairly secret, so I can't even tell you. I just hear about from the families that there are such. There's apparently some galleries here or there. From my understanding, it's mainly geometric and sort of hand stencil stuff. But the other kind of art you do get, there'd be little engravings on bowls. That's a caloundra, and hilltops. We tend to have stone arrangements, you know, piles of stones. This is actually Mount Walker, but I know there was some supposedly in this area too. Maybe arranged with, you know, lines between them and so on, and that was for ceremonies done up top. This is at Mount Tabletop, and there was a stone-lined path at the top there. This is the more usual thing you see. I love showing people this, because that's, you obviously know that's a Scalping, yeah. But guess where that is? That's a bus stop at Toowong. It's right opposite the hospital. And it's on the register, but most people wouldn't know, because there's no sign there because they tend to get vandalised. But this shows the kind of the typical, there would have been many, many scarred trees because obviously whenever you need a Kulamon or a shield or something, you do it. What's happening here? He's actually marking the base of this to show ownership. There'd be different shapes done if it's a male or a female tree, different type of carving in it. So even though we might look at it and not even notice, but for Aboriginal people, they'd often be able to tell a lot about the different sorts of trees. That's actually the removal for a canoe. They'd often take the strip all the way almost to the back, but it would regrow like this and it would eventually close over. You may see these occasionally, which are axe-grinding grooves. They're not very common, but here and there you get it. And that's usually near rainforest areas because they're sharpening up the axes to go and get honey or get possum out of a tree or something like that. Very often, even where I am, there was one set at Maruka. That's at Glidelines. The other interesting thing is that these sort of cupfuls, they call them, they're like little holes, and some of them seem natural, but the records I've read is that they were used to for all the toxic things like your black bean and so on, and you'd soak them in there. They're always near water, so the water would run over and leach off the poisons. They were used in that sort of fashion for the processing of food. And I've read descriptions where people walk along the creek and they'd see the whole creek rock areas had all this sort of paste like a potato cake or something, where the women had been preparing some of this, and processing this food. So it was an ongoing thing they do. Pullen other sites, but they're kind of not so easily. That's actually tournament area. Now, as I showed about those tribal alliances, you would have quite a few groups might come together for a fight, and not too often did anyone get killed. It was more just a venting of energies, you could say. But these could involve hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, and everyone would camp from different groups, and they'd all come together and have these clashes. That's actually Adelaide, but this is Brisbane. This I'm quite sure is this area. This was quite typical. See the little fire? The women would light that. It's there. See there again. And there was a whole ceremony where the women would come out with yam sticks and plant them in the ground and do their thing, and then the men would come out in a very set way. It was a very organised thing. It was very formal. The kippers, the initiates, and then the older ones, and so on. These were sort of flat areas, and often they had their own little rings in them. So that there are sites, but there's sometimes hard to find. You've got to kind of find them in the records. And campsites, which I talked about last time, which I'm not going to go into, but I just want to make the point that there were permanent places, quite large, because people would live quite spread out in that area, and often hundreds of people. Don't think of tens, more like hundreds. And there's some pictures that this actually shows you some of the variety you get in the camp. This is Stanthorpe. You see there's one that looks like a tent, and then you've got some lean-to if someone is probably just visiting for the day. Then a really big one there, which could be a family tent, a family hut, or sometimes it was a storage, This is at Kangaroo Point. You can see it's a round one, there's a little teepee one, and so on, That's a summer camp near Esk, and you can see that's just basically everyone's just almost sleeping in the open. It's too hot. And you'd also have this, like the platforms and stores. So there was variety in a camp. So the last thing I wanted to show you was about the fact that agriculture changed over time. It didn't, it wasn't just, as I said, from traditional to now. 1840s, 1850s, and again I'm using as early sketches and things that I can find. It was almost like there were two lifeways. Some groups were continuing to live traditionally, and others would be, or individuals might sort of end up working with white people. Like here's a stock worker, someone in charge of the horse. Paddy, who was the assistant to Leichhardt in his journeys. You had, on the other hand, you'd have just traditional life going on. This is a sketch from near the Lockyer, and that's Dundalli, who was the resistance leader. So you'd have people quite against what was happening, So there was, particularly in those early decades, there was a strong sort of like, no, we're going to keep our traditions and fight for our rights. As part of that, you all know about the Bunya Reserve. I've been trying to lately work out the exact area that embraced. There's sort of all different conflicting accounts. I've looked at tons of early maps, but this is getting a little close. And actually, I've found now since that it was probably just a straight strip up to the Bunya Mountains, because it was the whole Bunya lands. But at the time when they started this, they didn't know there was Bunyas out there. They only knew about them at the Blackwell Ranges, because that area too was kept basically white people weren't supposed to go there, but they did. Often there were police sent and so on, And this is the breakup of the runs at that time, nearly up to Noosa. But you can see this is how. If you're an Aboriginal living in the 1840s, the 1850s, this is getting into more than the 1870s, but sort of that period, you're basically living in lands that have been subdivided into these huge estates where white people are running cattle, usually around the periphery, because there's so much jungle and that's still here, and there's still rainforest and so on. So often these were more really timber reserves, because the main economy for a lot of the whites was actually the timber they were pulling out of these. But you can see that there'd be just like a handful of people at each of these. So traditional life was able to go on to some extent, because a lot of these were unfenced, and a lot of the environments are still there, so the camps are still up and running and so on. But when you get into the later edge of this period, you're getting into very violent times. This is some work I did with Meredith, who's somewhere in the back there. And this is just this area here, between about Nambour to about Kalula. Those X's are recorded or reported massacres. Now, I find that very interesting, because that's a very short period of time. There's not many white people, and yet there's a bloody lot of sort of killings, That's Yandina Station, which is supposed to be, the owners are supposed to, more according to some stories, shot people from the veranda and that sort of thing. But these are the type of police that were around. A lot of the activities were done with police, but actually the majority of it was done by settlers. The police were almost just backup. There weren't sufficient of them. But there were sort of three groups. There was the town police, who basically often didn't even have a horse. They just sort of hung around the town, but they were sometimes used against Aboriginal people. There were the mounted police, or the border police, and they were sort of, a part of that became the native police, and that developed into a very big thing, being used all over Queensland, and that was white officers with Aboriginal troopers, because they found that the most effective way of fighting Aboriginal people. So you have this sort of stuff going on by the 1860s and 70s. Now, this is Durandura Reserve, so the other thing that's starting to happen is people getting put in reserves. But what do you notice is different? Yeah, they're wearing clothes, but if you look at it, they're wearing clothes in their fashion. You see this lady here? Now look at this coming up. See here? They're basically wearing their dresses like you'd wear a traditional fur cloth. And I love this, because this is a young girl, but it's not obvious, but she's got, you can tell she's got this dress worn again with just under one arm, and then she's wearing a blanket like she'd wear a cloak, and then she's got the traditional headdress, And here, this fellow's got a rag that he's using as though it's an ornament, Incredible sort of fusion of culture. Here too, it was quite, the guys sort of would just wear trousers, but there was a blending of cultures going on. And having said that, though, there was a lot of the work was actually being done by Aboriginal people. Why? Well, there wasn't much of a white population, so who are the staff? I always use this because I think it's a great image. Widgie Station, which is near Gympie, but if you look carefully, and you can't, it's probably too small for you, but all this, right at the back, there's this white man there, standing like this. But all this stuff, these are people with the horses, these are the servants up front, they're all Aboriginal, This is Fraser Isle. There were Aboriginal timber getters who worked in with the. They helped not only find the timber, but they often did a lot of the cutting. Boat pilots. That's Tawantin, 1870, and the surveyor sat back and then sketched his assistant, who was Aboriginal, who took him there in a boat. This is just some of the jobs that were done by Aboriginal people at that time. And there was a lot of trade. That's in Ipswich. This is quite common seeing. You'd see women and children just on the side of the road with a whole lot of fish or whatever they had for sale. The boy actually has got he's got his hands and he's got like stones, so they would just basically trade or sell anything. There were by this time, it's a time of massacres. You know, the tide is turning, and you get people that I would call almost like desperados, and you know, one of them would be Johnny Campbell. They were like bushrangers who just went on a sort of a rampage. But they, in contrast to the time, let's say Dundalli, where you have quite effective resistance, now it's sort of more just a bit of sort of like a protest. And he's particularly famous, and he lived around here for his you know, brilliant sort of exploits in a way. But he actually got caught here at Tawantin, you know. But he was supposedly very cunning at sort of getting out of you know, being ever caught. They did catch him in the end. Now we're moving on, getting close to the end of the century. This is an orderly. Now, can you notice what's happening here? If you look at the huts. So they're using blankets and things like that. This is Mayora in Strapagon. You see these? You know, little windows. You know. This is Nambour Showgrounds, which was used which was a major camping ground for Aboriginal people. But you could see sort of like the bush is starting to retreat, you know. The interesting thing though is that Aboriginal people were actually quite important in some of the first buildings that were made here. The very first house, which was used as a kind of a guest house and everything in Caloundra, is the Bullcocks place, and that was built by Aboriginal labour. And I've read a number of very interesting accounts of the Sandy Cape Lighthouse. They actually had brought ships with all the blocks, you know, on the shore, and it was all Aboriginal workers who actually took it up. And then after that, a lot of the staff, even you know, decades later, were Aboriginal. They used to actually gravitate towards the lighthouses because that's where they could get work. You know, they'd get all sorts of you know, boating or you know, assistance or message delivering and stuff like that. And there's an account I read about this fellow visiting there and saying, oh, you know, all courteous, you know, Aboriginal staff there and all the stuff. In some cases, they actually manned some of the lights. This happened on Ryvie. It was the Turner sisters who are Indigenous. They were in charge of manning the lights because these are isolated places. So who are the people here? They're not largely Aboriginal. And that's in Gayndah, a camp, but you can see the change in times and see the people working with stock. Very common at the end of this period was everybody wanted to have a little Aboriginal kid as a servant, you know, and it became the thing. There were hundreds and hundreds of households in Brisbane that had Aboriginal workers. They were usually girls. Sadly, they were even taken, particularly if they were of mixed family, but not necessarily. They were taken and trained. There was a home at West End where this happened near Orley Park. So even from here, people would lose their kids or their wives. Or they'd be down there getting trained and then just sort of sent out to places. Alrina, she was from Duranda, which is at Woodford. There's some account of her mother. We don't really know much about that. I put this here because it's interesting. It's actually a statement from the Archbishop of Brisbane saying that if any girl was found out at night, she would be fired, you know. So just to show the controls around Aboriginal people at this time. You get a lot of stories about, the last of the tribe or so on, but actually you find they all had relatives and descendants, so then they weren't really the last of the tribe. But I wanted to show you this because I wanted to individualise it instead of like it's always like a blob of Aboriginal people, but in fact these are the ancestors of the Chilis and the Munkums. This is some others from, I think they relate to Eve Feasel. This is at Tawantin. That's at Bunya. Catch Penny and King Sandy were married for a while, and their descendants I know in Brisbane. This is Kitty, Queen Kitty, and Jackie Delaney, who was, they're real people, and they had actually, when you read about their stories, they actually had very interesting lives. Jackie Delaney, see, he's got this nose bone. That was a very high honour. That meant that you were a warrior that was considered a great protector and so on. And the stories you have of him are quite amazing like that. I think I showed you. You probably see him in the image just before here. That's him there. See, he was sort of dressed half traditional. But there's a lot of stories about how protective he was even of white people. There's one account that it was actually he was at somewhere out near Sanford, and the men had all gone from this area, and there was one white woman, and all these strange group of Aboriginal people came and camped near there, and she was very worried. So Jackie heard about it, and he went to her and said, "Don't worry, I'll stay." And he sat the whole night on the veranda, and every time he'd call out, "Don't worry, missus, I'm here, Jackie's here." And she said she didn't get any sleep, but she felt very safe. But, I mean, the fact that he would do that for, and for white people who weren't exactly, but King Sandy, he was quite known for, he gets photographed a hell of a lot, but he was important as a timber worker. He named a lot of the places around Brisbane when this was done officially. Catch Penny, she was actually known, she went to a lot of social engagement. She's often reported as being at fairs and things, and she would catch pennies in her mouth. That's how she got her name. Now that sounds ludicrous, but you've got to remember the times. At that time, a lot of people made their living by busking, and there was a whole freak show thing. But she was actually very good at this, and they said she'd go back home with like a whole dilly full of pennies, and people could throw it from hundreds of yards away, and she'd catch it in her mouth. And that was kind of it wasn't the only thing she did, but she became very well known all over Brisbane at that, and actually quite loved too. So here's some more on this, because I wanted to show there's a human side to this. Now, remember I talked about the lady who had she was wearing what they call a pubic kilt, like a little thing. Well, this is Queen Emma, and she's decided to wear it as a bit of an ornament across her chest. You see, so she's still got a bit of the traditional, and she's wearing the stuff of the time. That was her husband, King Billy, and he was actually the model for some of the first dolls that were made of Aboriginal headmen. There was an English lady that grew up when she was little. She lived at Noosa, right here. And I think I brought this up in the last talk, but I found it a fascinating story, because then in the 20s, she decided she had such good memories of him, and what a great warrior he is and all that sort of thing, that she's made these little models, and that became some of the first little touristy dolls of Aboriginal people that were ever sold. She lived in Sydney. Susie Chili is the ancestor of some of the Chilis. This is an interesting story. Yamara, some colleagues of mine in Brisbane are looking at this. Everyone heard of Archibald Niston? Some of you heard of him? Anyway, he was the protector of Aborigines, so he was like in charge of the Aboriginal, whatever, in the late 1890s, the first one for Queensland. Now, at that time, there was just so little interest in supporting Aboriginal people, and certainly he had a lot of trouble making ends meet. So one idea he had was to run this show which he called the Wild Australia Show. He actually went out all over Queensland, way to a lot of the wild areas, and actually caught people from different groups. And this man's a Cubby man, so he was from here, but other parts they went West Queensland, so on. They brought them all together, and they made this troupe, and then by boat they went from place to place and did these shows of corroboree and whatever and all this sort of stuff. They still hardly made a living out of it, but that was how tough it was. There was so little support for it. He was trying to keep the populations alive, and even that was just laughed at. One of the other people that was involved with him was Johnny Griffith, who was from here, and he helped with they made Nesbitt decided to make this massive archway to welcome the Duke of Cornwall when he came in 1901 to Brisbane. He died doing that, you know, I think he fell off it or something. But it was this thing that involved a whole lot of Aboriginal people standing on it. King Tommy of Noosa, he was from here. You see him in quite a lot of the early images. Now he was renowned as a timber worker, but he had an incredible sense of humour. And you probably heard the story about Noosa means Noosa, Tewantin means Tewantin. Guess who authored all that? This fella. And the story that I heard that he said about Nunda was best of all, because one of the local parliamentarians went and saw him when he was visiting Brisbane and said, "Oh, Tommy, so what does Nunda mean?" He said, and he started telling this whole tale about, the missionaries, that they used to come and stay at Nunda, and and every now and then we'd kill one and eat them, and then one day we turned up and there were none there. Now, why? He was actually taking the mickey out of this white guy, because guess what? No missionaries ever died. None were cannibalised, But he knew the whole story, how his people were being seen as cannibals and all this sort of stuff. So there's so many little stories like that about him, And he actually ended up getting his own little house. He wanted to have his own land. He actually bought his own land here. But the government, after he died, took that off him. And he particularly wanted to have just where he could be buried in his own land, and that wasn't even allowed. So it's pretty dismal. But he also was the first. He used to sell oysters and fish. Him and his wife seemed to have been the first to actually do that as a commercial thing. They would regularly do that at Tewantin, and him with King Brown. I think we had that here. Yeah, with King Johnny Boat. But with some of these, they actually used to do boating trips to the lakes here. They had a lot of these guys had incredible initiative. They had incredible enterprise. They weren't just sitting around thinking, "Oh, it's the end of the world because white people are here." It's a similar thing with next photo, I think it is. Here, Andrew Ball. Some of the first boating trips that were done were by him and his brother, and I think his father. They used to run that. At the time, when people came here, there wasn't much of a white population. And so some of this was even advertised. If you want to do your boating trip, you go see Andrew Ball. This is getting a little later now, the 1910s, but you notice some other changes. This is Peachester. Can you see the houses? And see this guy's got a little goatee beard, like the fashion of the time, This is Kalula. I love this guy for his little... But all the workers there, almost all, I think there's one white there, but almost all of them are Aboriginal, This is Andrew Ball working at Kenilworth on a horse. He also found the first gold at is it Cannondale, that area? Conondale, yeah. That started a little gold rush there in the 1920s, 30s, But, living very adaptive lives. Fred Embry he's the ancestor of, if you know Bev Hand or Alex Bond, he's their ancestor. He was an important headman for the Gubby, and there's stories about him sort of wandering around the area, but he was also informed, and the whole Garyanami song came out of him. So I think that's where I am. Yeah, so that's it. But I just wanted to make clear about the fact that there was this cultural change, and Aboriginal people moved, and they developed their own fashion too, the blending and so on. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got time for questions now.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. Don't run away there. If you just wait till you get the microphone, put your hand up so that everyone can hear your question, please, as well. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
The plaques that a number of them were wearing with their names on it, what was the origin of them?
They actually started out as if you look in the 1790s, 1780s, it was a military decoration, Royal Jet or something they called it, that was worn, and that started a bit of a tradition. It started in Sydney. They were what they call king plates or queen plates, and they were done to identify, head people. They were often actually officially coronated by like there might be a governor or something. They'd actually go through the ceremony and say, you are now the king of that area. Of course, that doesn't mean a lot in Aboriginal society, but they were often important people. They were often sought out because the white governor would notice, oh, this person's actually already got a bit of authority. And sometimes that was a good thing. Sometimes they actually used that to do a lot of good for their people because they had that in-between role, So, a lot of people say, oh, the shame of it, and it's sort of a... But from what I've read, a lot of Aboriginal elders never looked at it that way. They were quite proud of that, and they also used it as to get work for their people and all sorts of things, Jane?
All right, I was just going to add to that. I was talking to Edie Fiesel, who's related to King Tommy, and she actually said that they were...
Oh, and Jim Crow.
Jim Crow.
That's actually from the display, yeah. Go on.
Edie Fiesel was saying that as much as the Gorget, which is the military decoration, was that they kind of wore was a thing of shame, she said she was kind of thankful of it as well, because without him wearing this, she wouldn't have any photographs of so it made them kind of photographable. So she was sad, but also happy because she's got some memories.
It helps hugely for identifying. There are often there's many King Tommies and King Billies in there. I've had to deal with this, and it's really difficult. So it's great when they actually wear it and you can see the face and you go, oh, it's that one,
You had a couple of maps showing. On one you had Gubby Gubby, G-A-B-B-I. On another map it was Cubby Cubby, K-A-B-I. Have you had any linguistics actually work through the pronunciation and which one is actually the correct name for the local people of the area?
Oh, look, it's ongoing debate, and I try not to get too involved because it gets there are many different overlapping groups and families, and they have all their own version of this whenever I ask them. I do know linguists. Jeannie Bell's done a lot of work on this. Some say it's actually between a K and a G sound. You've got to remember, none of these languages were written down until recently. So, and also sometimes they spell it as with a K-A or a G, and others do K-U, or G-U.
Nobody else?
I know there was some others, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, a quick question. You had a map there of the massacres around this area marked by X's.
Yeah.
Lake Wyber had 2 X's, one Murdering Creek and one Umarilla. Do you know where the Umarilla X comes from? I've never heard of that one.
There was again, I'm dealing with stories and things, and it's hard to, and actually Meredith's probably more up on it. Where are you there, Meredith? Do you want to answer that one? I'm not 100% clear. I do know that there was one that was supposedly in the lake, and then one on that. But I was trying to get a little bit of an idea because I found there were several occasions. The original thought we had was that there was just Murdering Creek, but then when I looked into it, there were sort of stories all over the place. You got anything to say on that, Meredith?
Oh, well, there's stories of killings. How many people are involved in any of these events we don't know. But there are lots of killings. There are people in London, where I live, who report when asked what happened to the Aborigines, they said, well, they were shot. And they were shot, as Ray says, by the settlers and sometimes by the native police. But the only account that we have, or more detailed account we have of the massacre, is the Murdering Creek one.
Sorry, there was another. Yeah.
Can you tell us about skin names or skin groups?
Oh, that's not exactly my forte. But I don't know too much about that. That would be a good one for Alex Bond if he was here. The idea, though, I can tell you the basics, though, is that society is split into these sort of what they call moieties or halves, and that is. I've asked a Kimberley elder about this. I said to her, well, what's all that about? She said it's about making sure, she said, that everybody had some responsibility, every individual had someone who was responsible for them, And the other thing was as diffusing any conflict. That's also why you get all these sort of the mother-in-law things that you can't talk about, you can't do, to create peace, and it was also important for marriage. Like I say, that you couldn't marry from that moiety, you had to marry from so on, but it's extremely complicated, and in fact they had such a science of this, and I think it shows the brilliance of the Indigenous intellect, that over thousands of years they developed this massively complex system of assigning who would marry who, and who was responsible for who, and what your task was in life, and also then what your relationship was to different bits of land, so that there wasn't ever any like really war as we have it. It was, the other thing was like that you married out, so that you always had in-laws. So that's why even these tournaments, there was no sort of war of conquest, because your relatives are there. So it's just sort of like more of a, let's see how tough we are, kind of thing. So, football match, yeah, very. In fact, settlers used to come in little chairs and sit and watch these things. They were sort of the thing to go to. Yeah.
Right. There's 2 questions. The shields, the array of shields that you showed there, are they ceremonial purpose or defensive purpose? And if defensive, would they be able to stop the penetration of a spear? So?
Yeah, they were defensive, but the emblems were usually I'm reading this from what when Mackenzie said they were usually the group sort of symbol. Sometimes I think it's also the personal, and people made their own variants of that group symbol, so they had their own style. But yes, they did stop. If you actually see them, they're quite thick, and a lot of the shields were parrying shields. Basically, when you had a tournament, it was a sort of dance of trying to, people would throw the spear, and you'd sort of either get out of the way, or you'd deflect it, or it would hit. And so, if you look at some of the shields, they've actually got the little holes from the spears. Yeah.
The other question relates to canoes. I noticed from your illustration that they seem to be at random lengths.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they made little tiny ones. The women used to have little tiny ones for scooting about the wetlands to get oysters and crabs, because you don't want to be, if you're a woman, you don't want to be stepping in the mud every 5 seconds, So even they were very little shallow, tiny little things, and they were manoeuvrable, so they could do that. And you'd have massive ones it depends on the reason. Like if you're going out for a dugong hunt or something, you need something a little stronger than a little one that you're going to do your oysters in,
Ray,
yeah.
I've got a 16-foot canoe. It's made of fiberglass, not bark.
Right.
And I always wondered why 16 foot? It's about 5 metres, but it's an odd number. And I read up about it, and apparently quite a few cultures around the world, Africa, North America, South America, Southeast Asia, wherever they use canoes, and regardless of what system of units they use, their premium canoes end up at 16 foot.
Yeah. Might be some
it's
physics behind that, or I don't know.
It's a factor of the waterline length and the steerability of it and the speed. But you didn't notice anything like that amongst the local.
I haven't looked at this, but I guess there probably are something like that. As I said, I've read of ones that were 30, 40 feet long, but they were the really big, if you're going around the bay or something.
Thank you.
So to continue with the canoe discussion, you've been working with Lyndon Davis, is it?
Yeah, and Brent and Kerry was involved. There were a few that were involved in that.
Yeah. So, if and when are they coming back to the Noosa area to display all this?
Sorry?
Yeah, the canoe
Is it an amp?
he's made, well,
He keeps making new ones and doing it better and better. He's fine-tuning it. But the one, I think that's gone all over Australia. I don't know where it is now. No, I don't know. But I could ask him, or maybe I can ask him.
We did one with Gary last year as well. He was doing canoe building demonstrations at the Gary Festival down the road. He actually had to
He'll even do little ones for the kids.
Thank you for your talk.
That's it. Good on. Thank you.
No.
Oh, sorry.
This is a question.
Sorry. There you go.
Okay, thank you very much for your talk. It was so interesting. But I'd just like to know if the people in Noosa, we were talking about nets all the time, you didn't mention fish traps?
Oh yeah. Well, I showed a picture of a stone one, but actually most of them were weirs. They were brush weirs, and that was often quite common, But so few have survived. We don't have any images of them. No one ever bothered to take a photo or do a sketch, So that's why I couldn't show it there. But that was actually a very common way of catching fish.
In the river might be more difficult, but certainly out on the coast.
They did them on the coast and and on the rivers,
Yes, Ray. We European people have revere our dead, and we have cemeteries and headstones and everything. What do we know about the remains of the Aboriginal people that were here? We never really do for thousands of years. What's known about remains, or where they did that, or did they have burial sites?
Well, it's funny because I just had interesting what James said. I just had a discussion with Nerden, who's E. Fiesel's brother, and he was explaining to me that this fig here at Tawantin. Right? If you look at the sign, it says it's a burial fig. Well, he told me that's his great-grandfather's bones, and he said it was is it the humerus? Is it that one? There's one bone and one other. What basically they did was when somebody died, they did this whole process of they'd skin the body and they tan the hide. Then the body itself might be put on a platform, or it could be in a tree, or someone's buried until the flesh fell off. And then they would actually gather the bones. It was a woman who was assigned that, and she would put it in a big globular dilly. And you can still see they've still got a couple of examples in the museum in Brisbane. They're big things like this, And she'd carry this around, and I wondered what that was about. And then Nerden explained to me. He said, "No, well, the body had to do the whole of the country." So this lady would be actually carrying this around, and she'd show it to the kin, anyone who was related, his bones and so on. But then it would be discarded along the way. And he said, he said for them the bones it's just like the leftovers of that journey of doing the whole, and that's why you don't always find full skeletons. He said like you might get skulls or something being put in a crevice, particularly of a cliff or a rock face, that sort of thing. And other bits. The reason they put them in the figs is because the figs will grow over, and it was believed then that the ancestor went back into the tree, and you could actually talk to the ancestor by taking a leaf, and whispering to the leaf. So there's a number of I've found a number of accounts like in north of Bribie, Indooroopilly, Newstead House, where there were figs that were used for that, interment process.
I was thinking of the Bunya nuts and the Bunya mountains, etc. And I was told that every 3 years, approximately, there were invitations to all the other groups to come, and it was okay to come and have one great feast and take some back on their journey back home, and they would plant them, and that was how the Bunya Mountains area, which was the centre, they spread out closer and closer to the original families. And that's why when I saw you saying that the local ones had bunya trees here, but I don't remember hearing whether there are any collections of coastal groups for the bunya. Was that?
Oh yeah, there was Hilary Sullivan did a thesis on this. Yeah, there was the coastal gathering which was done where Broome Pocket is, in the lane, and there was the inland one done at Bunya Mountains. This was first, the explorers, when they talked about Bunya, they were actually talking about the ones here, But there were groves of Bunya all the way through, even at Mount Earway, and sometimes they had gatherings there too. So it was a very large area. And it seems, I've been still trying to work this out. I actually talked with George Main that they're going to do a big thing on this in the National Museum in Canberra now. It looks like that they started things, because it fruits a bit later in the Bunya Mountains, because the same group seem to be in the Bunya Mountains as we're here. So it seems like that they start there, it could be months, of doing the gatherings and being with each other there around, say, millennium, and going all the way out there, But the interesting thing is, they did actually take nuts back, and because they like to ferment them, they plant them in, not so much plant, but they'd store them in water near the camp. And these sprouted, they like eating them when they were sprouted. So I think that's why you get so many growths near where camps were.
And was there an actual, you've been good to us, let us come up here, come on down for our mullet?
Yes, that's right. Yes, it was very much exchange. They didn't say they'd holiday. They'd faced the hosts of the Bunya by oysters and fish down on the coast, and we have accounts of that. It was a long drawn out process. And it was an armistice too, everyone peace.
All right. Well, I think everyone's done with their questions. You've answered them ever so well.
Sorry.
This is a mystery to me, and I have to say it's related. When I was doing grade 8 in 1960, our set book was Booran, and it was a story of woodcutters that came up from Sydney, Newcastle area, and were shipwrecked, came in here, and the younger man was actually initiated into the tribe and stuff. I've never been able to trace that book. Do you know anything about it?
No, there was certainly.
And is anyone else in this mature age group that might have known
there's a fellow there that's put his hand up, no?
I know it, but I don't know where you can get it.
No, it's. I can't trace it on Google. I've looked, and I wondered whether it was very too much poetic license and it was withdrawn.
I think I have seen a book like that, and I think it was but
it's Queensland Book Depot.
Trove is an Australian, TROVE, the source of Australian books. Canberra has all Australian living.
Certainly there were castaways, and there were actually a lot of escapee convicts, that male and female, who went living with Aboriginal people, all over Southeast Queensland. I heard one count said there was like 700. That's a lot of people.
It pops up in Living Connor's book, Warrior, I think, the accounts of some of the shipwrecks as well around the Brisbane area.
All right.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. We're very, very lucky to have people of this calibre come along and give us that much information. Next week, we're back again with Glenn Ferguson to be talking about reconciliation. But before Ray goes, I'd just like to say thank you by presenting him a little book about Noosa and Kalula. So thank you from and thank you one and all. See you next week. Bye-bye.